Good afternoon, everybody. I remind all present that mobile phones must be switched off before the meeting and that the meeting is being recorded and live streamed. I declare the ordinary meeting of Council open at 3:30 on Wednesday, 20th of November, 2024. Wingecarribee Shire Council acknowledges the Gunnegarra and Tharawal people as the traditional custodians of this land. I pay my respects to the traditional custodians, their ancestors who care for this country for many thousands of years, and their elders and descendants who continue to care for country. I'd also like to extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people, including those today. Councillors, you are reminded of the oath or affirmation of office made by you under section 233A of the Act and your obligation under Councillors' Code of Conduct to disclose and appropriately manage conflicts of interest. There are no apologies. I'm on page 6 of the agenda. I move the adoption of the previous minutes for ordinary meeting of Council held on the 7th of August 2024, the extraordinary meeting of Council held on the 9th of September 2024, the ordinary meeting of Council held on the 9th of October 2024, extraordinary meeting of Council held on 30th of October 2024. Can I get a seconder, please? Councillor Kent. Would anyone like to speak for this? Against this? I put this. Can I get a show of hands, please? Unanimous? Carried? We'll do declarations of interest. I do have a declaration of interest on item 8.11. It is non-pecuniary, non-significant. I have a family member that made a submission and I will stay in the room. Are there any other declarations of interest?
Yes.
Councillor Champion. Oh, sorry. Sorry, go Councillor Russell. You did hit your microphone first. Apologies.
Thank you. I have a non-significant, non-pecuniary interest. However, I'll leave the room on item 8.1.6, the Community Circles Funding Agreement. Rose has cooked meals for me in the past and delivered them to me, so her kindness gives me a conflict.
Thank you. Councillor Champion.
There we go. My conflict is in relation to item 8.22. It is non-pecuniary and significant. My sister is a member of the Highlands Theatre Group and I will recuse myself and leave the chamber for that vote.
Thank you, Councillor Champion. Are there any other declarations? Great. Councillors, I now move a procedural motion that we resolve that the order of business be changed in order to bring forward the following items by exception, and that the officer's recommendation for each item be adopted. The items I would like to deal with by exception are item 8.7, item 8.8, item 8.9, 8.10, 8.11, 8.12, 8.13, 8.15, 8.17, 8.18, 8.20, 8.22, 8.23, 8.25, 8.26, 8.27, 8.28. Are there any items within this list that any councillors would like to speak or vote against? Sorry?
Excuse me, Mr Mayor, I think the Manager Governance would like to say something.
Okay.
I think Councillor Champions said that she'll leave the chamber for 8.22, so we won't be able to move that one by exception.
That was 8.22, was it? Okay, so we'll put that back in. Great. So I'll say that again. Are there any items within this list that any councillors would like to speak or vote against?
Just to say, I think you mentioned 8.8 in the list.
8.8. Yes, that should be highlighted. So you want to pull that out as well?
Yes, please.
Sorry, did you get that? That end? Yep. So 8.8 is now going to be brought up. Just have another check through, guys, and see if there's anything else there.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to post some amendments to some of those items.
To
Microphone, sorry.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, I'd like to propose some amendments to some of those items.
could you tell me which items they are, please?
How long have you got?
So just the item numbers,
Okay.
and we'll pull them out, and that means they'll be
Okay. 8.16.
that's still in. Yep. Yep. Just go through them. That's okay. I can just let you know whether they're in or out.
Oh, the exceptions. No,
Okay,
not
sweet.
the exceptions.
Awesome. Thank you.
Understood. Thank you.
So if we're happy, could I get a seconder on that?
Yep.
Councillor Duffy, and I will put that to the vote. Raise your hands. And that's carried unanimous. Just 2 seconds while I fix up my paperwork, guys. Apologies. I just need to move another procedural motion that we pull 8.13 out because that is the committees that we have to resolve today. So could I get a seconder to do that, please? Councillor Kent, and I'll put that to the vote. That's carried unanimously. Apologies. Alrighty. So the mayoral amendment. It is very clear that there remains a lot of frustration and anxiety in the community about Barrel South development, with the biggest contributing factor being issues surrounding flooding. I am very glad to see the recommendation for the establishment of the Floodplain Risk Management Advisory Committee on the council agenda this meeting. The establishment of such a committee will play a crucial role in linking council, state agencies, key stakeholders and the community to develop and implement a flood risk management plan by contributing ideas, professional expertise, experience and local knowledge. Councillors have a clear role in making strategic and policy decisions. One way that this can occur is through the provision of briefs for the engagement of consultants for projects that have significant and long-term strategic impacts on our community. Council engages consultants to undertake work on its behalf from time to time for work where there is a need to engage expertise not found in council, as in economists, and or because of grant opportunities and or where additional resources are required. Whilst during the period of administration, briefs for this type of work have been put in the business paper, I would like to formalise this for both the council and the community. The provision of briefs provides the opportunity for the community and councillors to understand and have input into the scope of the brief prior to the commencement of a project. This also supports our commitment to transparency and accountability, as the public can see that decisions are based on thorough professional assessments rather than assumptions or limited information. To ensure that our focus stays at a strategic and policy level, I propose the briefs for the engagement of professional services are presented to council for endorsement where the engagement is estimated to be over 250,000, or impact is long-term, or impact on more than 10,000 people and is or shire wide. It is not intended for technical or construction projects, however will be used for plans and studies, for example, integrated transport strategies and land use planning studies. So the recommendation is that the General Manager provides briefs for consultancy services for the preparation of plans, strategies or studies to the Council for endorsement where the project engagement is over 250,000 or impact is long-term or outcomes impact on more than 10,000 people or shire wide. It be noted, and number two, it be noted that this is not related to technical or construction projects. Would anybody like to speak to this minute? Councillor Moylan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. At the outset, I'd like to say I think this is a wonderful initiative. I think it's exactly what this shire needs and has been looking for, and it's made my day. Can I suggest that so that we can really implement the intention of this Mayoral minute, that Council provide a report detailing the frequency of the consultants that are engaged, the average transaction value, perhaps a pipeline for the next 6 months so that we can see how often these engagements will come up, and importantly, whether these consultants have already gone through the rigour of the procurement process or if they're new.
Sure, I'd happy to. Do you want to help me word that, please, General Manager? And we'll get some words up on the screen. Are you happy with that wording, Councillor?
Yes, that looks good, and yeah, and importantly, the average transaction value.
Happy with that wording?
Yes, thank you very much.
Great. Would anyone else like to speak for this minute? Great. I'm happy with the, I am happy with that recommendation, so I'll leave that in there. And I will put that to the vote. Sorry, would you like to second that also?
Yes.
Sorry. And I'll put that to the vote. And that is carried unanimous. Thank you. Our first report is 8.1 Annual Report of the 2023-24 and State of our Shire Report. We do have a speaker here today, so I'll move a procedural motion that Stu Reeve of Micromex present to Council an overview of the 2024 community research results. Could I get a mover for that? And that's Councillor Kent. Could I get a seconder? Councillor Moylan, and I'll put that to the vote. And that is carried unanimously. General Manager.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And as you mentioned, we have Stu Reeve from Micromex joining us virtually via Teams to provide a presentation on the community research results. Following that, the Director Corporate Strategy and Resourcing, Ms Jones, will provide a bit of an overview of the annual report and the State of the Shire report and how this information as well as other information is brought together. So I'll hand over to you, Stu. Can you hear us? Great, you're on mute, but you may wish to unmute yourself. There you go. Thank you.
Am I off mute now? Yes. Hello, can you people hear me? Sorry.
Yes, we can.
Oh yeah,
so,
good,
yep,
great.
Welcome to start.
Okay, great.
Ready.
Okay, thank you so much for having me here today. I've got only a short period of time, so I'll just take you through the key outcomes from the community research we conducted for Windsor Carriby this year. We've been working with Windsor Carriby for the last 14 years, actually. So we've got a database of data that we'll talk to a little bit about as well. Look, the key thing here is obviously there's been some big changes, not just across Windsor Carriby in terms of the administrator, but across the state and the country and the world over the last few years. And there has been some data impacts there, and I'll talk to those as well. Why do we do community research? The community research is to give you a barometer or a measure of where the community is on a range of different topic areas or ideas in terms of what their priorities are and their level of satisfaction. And in a key essence, it gives you a measure that you can then plan from and plan against. So that's what we covered off in this particular community survey. The survey was conducted via telephone. With this telephone survey, we conducted 400 interviews. You can see the majority of these were conducted by mobile phones from the commercially available databases. When you've got a random sample, and this is a managed sample, you get something called a confidence limit or a margin of error. And in this case, our margin of error is plus or minus 4.9%. To give a perspective on that, when they do across an entire country, when they do polling, so while we've got 400 residents across a population of around 50,000, when they do polling across the country in the same scientific manner, they have a sample size of 1,200 to reflect the views of 17 million voters. So when you have a managed sample, you can have confidence that your data is replicable. And I'll quickly just, after we collect that data from our telephone interviews, we then weight the data to reflect the age and demographics of the area. So the data we can see here is we've got, we do have a skew to an older population in Windsor Carriby. We've had a lot of people who've been living there for, 3/4 of the population have been living for more than 20 years. We have a mix of people from all different towns and villages across the LGA. And I just want to go back quickly to a managed sample and versus unmanaged sample. And does size matter in terms of sampling? And it does from the terms and perspective of a managed sample, because you get confidence limits, but unmanaged samples not so much. An example of this would be a recent work we did about 2 years ago for Ku-ring-gai Council. We had a representative survey, which you can see is the dark blue colours there. So the representative sample was asked, what are the future priorities for the area? An open-ended question. And we could see from the representative sample that 16% referred to wanting more and improved sporting facilities. 1% wanted all-weather artificial turf, whereas the opt-in sample, the people that decided to take part in the research, 2/3 of them wanted improved facilities, and 1 in 5 wanted an artificial turf, which is kind of a real mix in terms of, well, why is there so much difference here? And the difference is it was an unmanaged sample, and what we could see was that the average person who took part in the survey online was a female aged between 35 and 49 who had children, who was a member of a sporting association, had a dog, and was actually, when we looked at the data a little bit further, a member of a couple of different sporting clubs who had advocated to their members to take part in the survey. So if we made plans based on the back of this, we'd be looking at data based on those people who opted in rather than the broader community. So it's really quite important to think about how samples are managed. And I think here you can see that if you looked at the data from an unmanaged sample, 2/3 of things were about sports grounds and 60% were about outdoor courts, whereas really from our broader sample, you can see that walking trails are important. But anyway, I digress a bit to talk about the community of Wingecarribee and what's been going on across your LGO for the last few years. Essentially, we had a couple of open-ended questions, and there is a much broader report you can review. But we can see here that when we ask people about the best things of living in the area, it's about the natural environment, the open space, the sense of community, the friendliness, the peace and quiet. And there's some other aspects as well that people talked about in terms of proximity to the city and getting around. But there is that sense of community and that ruralness that people still love and embrace about the area. In terms of the challenges moving forward and the things that people want council to focus on over the next 4 years, over this term of council, we can see road maintenance is certainly coming up. Controlling, managing development is another thing. Council management overall, and this survey was conducted in June, so there is, July of this year, so this was prior to the election. So one of the things that are being addressed there is, being addressed by the fact that we have a new councillor set in place, and looking at the way infrastructure matches with population growth and development. So these are the sort of things that people are talking about if we ask them open-ended. I think that roads is an interesting one, because obviously across the entire eastern seaboard, New South Wales per se, I've been talking about the fact that with the amount of rain we've had in the last 5 years, a lot of roads have been washed away and scores have been particularly challenging. So those are the key priority areas that people want the community want you to focus on. In terms of what's happened recently, there's a high level of awareness that there's been an administrator. So 93% of the population were aware there was an administrator in place. You can see that certainly if you're over 35, you're aware, but if you're under 34, only 2/3 of you are aware, but very high levels of awareness. And I think what's interesting here is that when we look at the scores for the administrator in terms of overall performance, representing the community views, fairly and effective leadership and guidance, over time we've seen the erosion of those scores. Some of this is going to be bigger than just the administration, and I've got some other data that will talk to this as well in a moment. But realistically, we can see here there has been a decline in satisfaction with what was happening under the administration, and qualitatively, this is probably the fact that people, they were tired of being administrated. They wanted an elected council back in place. But certainly those scores from 2022 from 70% down to 55 is a significant decline, as to is 71 down to 57. So there's been some drops there that it would be accounted for when we look at the data a bit further. In terms of council priorities and council delivery, I think, one of the key metrics we always use in this sort of research is overall satisfaction with council performance. And this is one where I've got a little bit of new data that I just put in the slide while I was waiting while the mayoral minute was underway. We can see that 49% of residents said they were at least somewhat satisfied with the performance of council, which is much lower than previous years and lower than our regional benchmarks. You can look across the years. In 2010, we were at 85. We dropped down to 82 in 2015, and then 76 on the back of an SRV in 2016. So we're consistent there. And since the replacement of council, we can see there's been a sort of a steady decline there. So below benchmarks, it's across all age cohorts, really. No mere one. Males potentially a little bit more grumpy, but that's sort of part of play of when we see in this category. Interesting though, the bottom there, I've just put a table in which sort of shows the trend across regional councils. We've been pulling our benchmarks together. In pre-COVID times, we could see 84% of residents were at least somewhat satisfied with council across the regions. During COVID, it was at 82. Don't forget, between that period is the fires and floods as well and COVID. And since we've opened back up, there's been a significant decline, a good 6-point decline. So there's been a real shift in satisfaction with with councils per se. And I think it's not just councils per se, it's quality of life and also other indicators per se as well. In terms of communication, we've seen a similar thing. Sometimes the same results about overall satisfaction and communication highly correlate. You know, there is the message, and sometimes it's the message, not the messenger, that is not people aren't satisfied with. But either way, we're seeing that as an impact as well. In terms of the key part of the survey, a lot of it is looking to see what the community, what areas the council services that the community prioritise and their level of satisfaction with that. So you'll see in this chart here, we've got the importance. We've got those with T2 box importance, which refers to the proportion of the population that gave the scorer what proportion of the population said the area was important or very important to them. So 95% of people said that town drinking water quality was important. Reliability of water is 94%. Domestic garbage collection 91. 89 was sewerage, and then 87 was roads. That's the percentage of people who said these were important. Now, there's other areas of lesser importance, and I say lesser or lower, but not low, because when you look at this, the lowest rated one there is swimming pools, and that's at 55% of the population think it's important. So none of the council service areas are not unimportant. They're just less relatively important against things like water and waste collection. But we can see here, you know, support for arts and culture at 58, beautification 58, public transport and protecting heritage just around 60. The flip side is we don't ask satisfaction if something's not important to communities to get a clearer bandwidth on where the score is in terms of satisfaction. We can see here libraries are providing extremely high levels of satisfaction, with 98% of those who say it's important saying they're at least moderately satisfied. We drift down to things like support for arts and culture, which is at 89%. So high levels of satisfaction there. Sometimes things of lower importance are because they're actually providing already high levels of satisfaction, and that would correlate with the data there. Lower scores are around particularly, and I think there's no other way to say this, the condition of roads. That's a significantly low score, 12% of the population saying they're at least somewhat satisfied with the quality of the roads, local roads. It's certainly on the low end of what we see in category. After that, we have opportunities to participate in council decision making and council provision of information, as well as management of development. And these two again talk to that long-term planning. How do you fit populations in? How do you make population growth work? How do you bring the community on board and take them across the messaging to make it happen in a way that is acceptable, or certainly should take the community's input on board with it. The satisfaction scorecard, we've got our service areas as 16. We've got 43 service areas that we ask people about. We can see here the ones that are performing well, which are in green, the ones that we're in the monitor areas, so 60 to 79%. You know, obviously everyone would love to see them improve, and then there's areas where of lower relative satisfaction, less than 60, and so roads, parking, traffic management, transport, drainage, participation and information, managing growth and development, and support for youth. All these are areas of weaker satisfaction. And so with all this, there's a lot of data. What do we do? How do we move forward with this? And I think what we do is, we run a regression where we look at the relationship between how people have rated their satisfaction across all these areas and their overall satisfaction with council. And what we can see when we do that is just how critical communication and engagement is. And while we haven't qualitatively explored it with Wingecarribee, we've explored this across many other organisations, and that is, generally speaking, not just the team involved with the communication and engagement. It's an organisational piece. It's also a piece that reflects and will be part of what the council remit as well. And so all these things are important in terms of driving community satisfaction moving forward. Any of the things that appear on this score, if we can improve satisfaction with them, will lift overall satisfaction across the community. When we ran this again, we can see here adding in some of the factors around the administration in terms of representation of views, effective guidance, and overall satisfaction. We can see just how important the administrator is. So yourselves now as a councillors replacing the administrator, there's a lot on your shoulders and a lot of things to move forward. So this is an opportunity to really strengthen from where we are in terms of the baseline that's been set here, prior to your election. We can also look into, when we add in communication, it is all about the relationship. It's about the way you inform, involve, respond and resolve community issues and listen to community. And I think that's always a challenge. How do you bring the community along with you? How do you make sure they're involved? But I think it is just, across the media landscape and the information landscape we live in, it's being multimodal. It's approaching every aspect. One thing we do know, the more connections people have, the more likely they are to be satisfied with what's being provided, the more likely they're going to feel like they're understood or at least being listened to. That is my 15 or so minutes done, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Do we have any questions, councillors?
Director Corporate Strategy and Resourcing, would you like to introduce the annual report and State of the Shire? Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager, Mr Mayor, and through you, Mr Mayor, councillors. This particular report presents Council's annual report for 2023-24 and the State of the Shire report for the period July 2021 to June 2024. Both reports provide the opportunity to reflect on both the last financial year through the annual report and the period of time since July 21 through the State of the Shire report. There are significant achievements to be recognised in and among extraordinary circumstances, among which Stu from Micromex has already alluded to, being the public inquiry, the period of administration, the pandemic and repeated extreme weather events. There are a number of opportunities for improvement to be considered as well as we start planning for the future. The State of our Shire report outlines progress against the outcomes, the high-level strategies and priorities of the Community Strategic Plan. Informing that progress is the community survey research which have been presented to this meeting, along with other numerous data points which are included in the reports proper. The reports outline how the organisation and others have worked hard for the community over this time and in doing so build a strong foundation for the new council to build upon as we commenced in earnest our planning for the future for this term and beyond. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Welcome. Councillors, the recommendation is on page 8. Could I get a mover of this, please? Councillor Kent, and a seconder. Councillor Champion. Councillor Kent, would you like to speak to this? Would anyone else like to speak for this? Councillor Russell.
It was very clear from the State of the Shire report the priorities our new incoming council need to work upon to improve our standing in the community. It's clear that roads is a top priority, development applications comes in number 2, and thirdly, communication. And just from feedback I've had from the community that communication needs to be separate to marketing and that we need to look at all the different ways we can address those issues. And so this does provide us with an excellent baseline to work on, and I know that with such a good new incoming council, we will improve these figures over this term, even just in this year. We will work hard to do that and assure the community that we are on top of this.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. Would anyone else like to speak for this? Anyone like to speak against this? And I would like to add that whilst every other council around Australia was functioning under the 9 or 15 councillors, this one was not, and that's a tough thing to do. So, yeah, I agree with everything you're saying. That we've seen it loud and clear, and we know what job we've got to do. So, I agree, Rachel. I'll now put this to the vote, and that is carried unanimously. Item 8.2, presentation of audited financial statements for the year ended 30 June 2024. I'll need to move a further procedural motion that Farah Youssef of the Audit Office of New South Wales present the audited financial statements for the year ended 30 June 2024 to Council. Could I get a seconder for that, please? Councillor Foley, and I'll put that to the vote. That is carried unanimous. General Manager.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll actually ask the CFO to introduce Farah Youssef from the Audit Office of New South Wales, and we thank you for coming along, making the trek this afternoon. So, Mr Kuzmanowski, if you would mind introducing the Audit Office and why they're here, and after Mr. Youssef has finished, if you could then elaborate on the end of financial year statements. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. The purpose of having the Audit Office here is to provide an independent opinion, not just my opinion, but the independent opinion on the conduct of the audit. So it gives the Audit Office to, I guess, give the overview of Wingecarriby's financial statements and I guess the bigger picture of where the Audit Office is heading for their 24-25 program. So thank you, General Manager.
Thank you, General Manager, and thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the opportunity to attend the meeting today. I have prepared a brief presentation. If that could be presented, that would be appreciated. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Furqan Yusuf, and I'm the Director of Financial Audit at the Audit Office of New South Wales. Today, I'm here to present the outcomes from our 30 June 2024 financial statements audit for Wingecarriby Shire Council. Before I jump into the financial performance of the year, I just wanted to briefly touch on the role of the Auditor General and the Audit Office of New South Wales. If I could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. The Auditor General helps the New South Wales Parliament hold government accountable for the use of its public resources, and he achieves that by undertaking audits for New South Wales state, local government, and university auditees. The Auditor General is appointed by the New South Wales Governor for a term of 8 years and is not eligible for reappointment. Our current Auditor General, Bola Oyotunji, was appointed recently, and he commenced his role early this year in March. He has extensive audit experience and has previously worked at the Audit Office for over 16 years, as well as he also has worked with Australian National Audit Office for 6 years. The Audit Office of New South Wales, on the other hand, is a statutory authority established under the Government Sector Audit Act 1983, with the objective of conducting audits on behalf of the Auditor General. We have two main branches, Financial Audit Branch and the Performance Audit Branch. The Financial Audit Branch is responsible to audit the financial statements of the auditees, which includes the state, local government, as well as the universities. And the Performance Audit Branch undertakes audits and reviews of public spending to ensure money is spent effectively, efficiently, and economically, and in accordance with the legislative requirements. Thank you. The Auditor General has recently issued an annual work program, which actually sets out the financial audit focus areas for the upcoming financial year and also foreshadows the likely performance audits for the future years. On the next two slides, I've just summarized some audits that are relevant to the local government sector. The next year's planned performance audits in the local government sector includes topics such as road asset management, coastal management reforms, and the long-term financial planning. The road asset management report actually is going to be tabled in Parliament tomorrow, so I would encourage you all to have a quick look at that. Looking ahead, there will also be audits around climate risks, performance and waste management, as well as the review of governance issues within the local government sector. The financial statements focus areas for our 30 June 2024 local government sector report to Parliament will include information on audit results, which will outline the type of audit opinions the Auditor General has issued in the sector and highlight any issues that are identified around the quality and timeliness of financial reporting process. It will also include commentary around common financial control issues and observations that are identified through the audit. And the Auditor General will also comment on the findings from the review of controls around information technology and cybersecurity controls, as well as governance practices in councils such as code of conduct training, fraud risk assessment, management of conflict of interest declarations, etc. I will now turn to our report on the conduct of the audit. We have completed our audit for the general purpose and the special purpose financial statements for Wingecarribee Shire Council for 30 June 2024. I'm pleased to report that I've issued a clean audit opinion, which means that the council's financial statements do not contain any material misstatements and present fairly the financial performance and position of the council. The next few slides gives a high-level overview of council's audited financial information. If I can go to the previous slide, please. Thank you. This slide outlines the movement in the income statement and the key items in terms of revenue and expenses. As you can see that the rates and annual charges revenue increased by 5.5 million during the year. It was mainly due to an approved rate variation of 4.1%. The grants and contributions revenue, on the other hand, decreased, and it was mainly due to a decreased income from the transport and communication grants received during the year. The operating result, as well as the net operating result before capital grants and contributions, improved significantly during the year, and it was mainly due to increase in the rates and annual charges revenue and decrease in expenditure. And expenditure declined in terms of the expenses around materials and services expenses, as well as the losses from the disposal of assets also decreased during the year. If I can move to the next slide. Yes, thank you. This slide outlines the council's cash position. As you can see that the council had sufficient cash and investment balance at 30 June 2024. A portion of this cash is externally restricted and can only be spent for the purposes for which it was collected. In the past, we have identified some councils in the sector breaching legislation by not having effective controls to manage externally restricted funds and end up in financial difficulties. I'm happy to confirm that no such instances were identified at Wingecarribee Shire Council, and there are appropriate controls in place to manage cash. The next slide provides an overview of the council's performance using the 6 key performance measures and benchmarks as set by the Office of Local Government. The results of these ratios indicate council's continuing financial sustainability. As you can see that the council has met the benchmarks for all 6 performance measures during 23-24, and it has been the case over the past 3 years other than operating performance ratio last year. I'll quickly go through this individual ratios. The operating performance ratio is the first and measures how well council contained their expenditure within the revenue that they generated. The OLG benchmark for this ratio is greater than 0%, and the council has reported a 1.3% ratio. The own source operating revenue ratio looks at how much the council is reliant on external funding, such as state and federal grants. The benchmark set by the Office of Local Government is greater than 60%, and council has reported a ratio of 71.3%, exceeding the benchmark. The unrestricted current ratio indicates council's ability to meet its short-term obligations. The benchmark set is greater than 1.5 times, and the council has reported a ratio of 2.8 times. The debt service cover ratio measures the amount of cash generated to service debt. The OLG benchmark is greater than 2 times, and the council has reported a ratio of 10.5 times. The rates and annual charges outstanding percentage assesses the adequacy of the debt recovery efforts in the council. The benchmark that's set by the Office of Local Government is less than 10%, and the council has reported an outcome of 4.8%. The last ratio is the cash expense cover ratio. And this ratio theoretically proves that how long a council could continue meeting its obligations without any additional cash inflows. As you can see, the benchmark from the Office of Local Government is greater than 3 months, and the council has reported an outcome of 23.5 months. Last slide, please. Thank you. This slide gives an overview of the council's expenditure around assets. The council renewed assets amounting to 43 million during the year and added new assets amounting to 45 million during the financial year end 30 June 2024. Lastly, I would like to just thank management, particularly the finance team, for working with my team in terms of getting this audit over the line. And I really appreciate the professionalism and cooperation between the two teams. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Have any councillors got any questions? Councillor.
Mr. Youssef, thanks very much. Can we go back to slide 10, please? Slide 10, so the next one down. Now, my reading of this is 6 out of 6. There's 128 councils in New South Wales. Are most of them 6 out of 6?
Thank you. Do you want me to?
Yes, please. Yeah.
If I could have the microphone. Thank you very much. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Most of the regional and rural councils are not able to meet all the benchmarks. And mainly it's the own source operating revenue ratio, which is difficult for the regional councils to hit the benchmark because of the insufficient avenues to generate the own source revenue. So I would say the answer to your question is no. Not all the councils or most of the councils would be hitting 6 out of 6 benchmarks.
Thanks very much.
Any other questions? Okay, great. Sorry, Councillor Foley.
Just a question again on that slide there. The operating performance seems to have fluctuated quite a fair bit in those 3 years numbers that you've presented there. Is that typical for operating performance, or does it tend to usually sort of look stable?
Thank you very much. I have noted that this ratio does fluctuate quite a bit in a number of councils, and the main reason being that there are quite a few income statement line items that could affect that. Anything that changes from last year in terms of revenue or expenditure would impact the outcome of this. So to answer your question, yes, it does fluctuate quite a bit. However, significant items such as last year we had losses on disposal of assets, as I mentioned before. That was the main reason for the 3.2% negative last year, which has incurred this year, and that's why a positive ratio of 1.3%.
Councillor Russell.
Thank you for this report. Is there anywhere in your audit that you look at the costs required to bring our current council assets up to an acceptable level of service delivery?
Thank you for that question. Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is not part of our audit. That's, I think, a separate special schedule that the council prepares and submits to Office of Local Government. At this stage, the Auditor General doesn't have the mandate to audit that information.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Youssef. Appreciate that, and 6 out of 6 is pretty good. I might ask the CFO just to talk a little bit further about that, and also Mr. Kuzmowski, if you could touch on just the roads question, and I might ask the Director Service and Project Delivery to add just in terms of disaster impacts on our roads and the latest advice we received today. Mr. Kuzmowski, over to you.
Thank you, General Manager. in addressing the roads question, that is more a focus of the long-term financial plan. So we will work with councillors and the impacts on, I guess, where we are heading from a financial trajectory position. This is at a point in time and a position point in time, and we have quarterly reviews, we have annual budget reviews, and we review our long-term financial plan annually so we can readjust our trajectory to ensure that our asset management practices and our funds align to good asset management practices where reasonable. So in addressing that, that will be managed through the budget process rather than through this reporting process. So just covering off just a brief, just a Mr. Yusuf has stole my thunder, so thank you. But just a couple of additional points to add into what Mr. Yusuf has said. Our unrestricted working capital position is above $6 million, above the benchmark that council has set at $5.8 million. So that's another good news story from a council perspective. We haven't had to eat into our general revenue funds in getting to year ends. We have met all our financial and infrastructure indicators as determined by the Office of Local Government. So there are some additional infrastructure indicators that are not audited, but they do still form a part of the reporting packaging that we do have that do touch on how we are trending at the back of our special schedules. So you can see that council is trending, in particular with our infrastructure ratios, they are trending downward just due to high inflation, which is increasing our depreciation costs. So there are impacts that we do need to make sure we stay on top of. So we are exceeding all our ratios. So other than that, just wanted to confirm that our audited financial statements were submitted to the Office of Local Government by the 31st of October, which is in line with the deadline of 31st of October prescribed by the Office of Local Government. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kuzmanowski. Just before I hand over to Mr. McAllister, over the last 6 months, we've been through the assets area, been doing a lot of work in terms of our roads and understanding the condition of our roads through a more robust evidence-based collection. So we've engaged a specialist consultant, IMG, who have taken footage of our roads, and the assets team are in the process of feeding that into an asset management system. And as the CFO said, that's something that we'll look at in terms of having a more accurate assessment of the condition of roads. And also, I think the point was around what's an acceptable level, and that is determined by the community as well, what's acceptable. And you just heard from Micromex that roads and the condition of the roads are a big concern for our community, and we appreciate that and we understand that. I might ask Mr. McAllister to talk about the latest advice we've had in terms of natural disaster declarations. Thank you.
Thank you, General Manager. Through you, Mr. Mayor, just to advise the councillors that today we did receive an additional natural disaster declaration for the storm that occurred on the 23rd of August. So that now moves council up to 15 natural declared disasters in the last 5 years. Sorry, and just to highlight, although it's not confirmed, it's not a leaderboard that we really want to be on, that does actually place us in the lead across the state as the Shire with the most natural disasters.
Councillors, the recommendation is on page 12. Could I grab a mover for that, please? Councillor Duffy, and a seconder. Councillor Smith. Would anyone else like to speak for this motion? Councillor Smith.
I'd just like to say to the CFO and the General Manager through the Mayor that it's a great relief to see the financial statements in such good condition. I'm not quite sure how you've done it, but that's fantastic. And I have one second part to that question. In relation to the natural disasters, does that mean we have a greater chance of grant funding from the state government in any way?
General Manager.
I'll ask the Director. It's been a bit of an ongoing discussion we've been having with our cousins in the state. Mr. McAllister.
As with, I guess, politics and grant funding, nothing is guaranteed, but it certainly does strengthen our position in regards to the ongoing frequency that you have, and then what impact that is actually having upon our assets. And because of the frequency, the lack of ability to actually recover from one natural disaster through to another. So there is a lot of work occurring with our state government bodies, just in speeding up the process so that we can make sure that funds are released and or work can actually occur to get the infrastructure back up to standard.
Would anyone else like to speak for this? Councillor Kett?
I'd just like to say that as a new councillor, it is a great relief to see the finances in the position they're in. During the campaign for the new council and the new council education sessions, there was quite a bit of sort of discussion, noise in the Southern Highlands about finances and various views. I just say it's a great relief for me to see the reports, to absorb the reports and to see the result. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak for this? Yes, thank you, Mr. Councillor Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to further those sentiments that there's an onus on us as a new council to share this message to the community at large. There was a lot of concern during our election campaign, and we can now confidently say that things are in order, and we have measures in place to continue financial management and scrutiny to keep this level of stability.
Thank you. Any other councillors want to speak for this? Any councillors want to speak against? And I will add, I agree. I feel in very safe hands. Congratulations, guys. I'll put this motion. I got a show of hands. Unanimous, carried. Item 8.3, Audit Risk and Improvement Committee Annual Report 23-24. I do have to move another procedural motion because we have another speaker, and that is that Stephen Horn, Chair of the Wingecarribee Shire Audit Risk and Improvement Committee, present the 2023-24 Audit Risk and Improvement Committee Annual Reports to Council. I will move that. Could I grab a seconder, please? Councillor Smith, and I'll put that to the vote. And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before I hand over to Mr. Horn, I should say we've been very fortunate to have Mr. Horn as the chair of the ARIC, the Audit Risk and Improvement Committee, since 2021. And Mr. Horn sits on a number of ARICs across the state, and also both in local government, state and further abroad. So we're very fortunate to have his experience in Wingecarribee along with his colleagues on the ARIC. This is for councillors' benefit. This is an annual process, so the chair of the ARIC will present their annual report usually around November each year to the council, and provides you also with the opportunity to ask the chair directly any questions you may have. Over to you, Mr. Horn.
Thank you. Thank you, General Manager, and thank you, everybody. On behalf of the Wingecarribee Shire Council Audit Risk and Improvement Committee, I'd like to present our annual report covering the period of activity from July 23 to June 24. The report in your meeting papers formally details the activities and considerations of the committee during this period. It's a pleasure for me to report that the committee continues to make progress in discharging its responsibilities as set out in its charter, which was revised just recently. It's been a particularly busy period for the committee, with ongoing reform across many areas of council operations, guided by the strategic roadmap. The committee is made up of a strong mix of skills from independent members who add value to the council's governance and control processes through their diverse experience and knowledge. The committee is very grateful for the insights and assurance afforded it through the internal audit and risk management functions within council, which help us to understand the maturity and effectiveness of the very complex tapestry of checks and balances that operate across all facets of council's operations. Through these multiple channels and endeavours, the committee seeks to support the elected body with insights and assurance regarding council's control environment, which includes both its hard controls and also soft controls such as culture, values and behaviours. An effective control environment operating with a mature risk culture is a proven building block for high performance, an outcome which all organisations seek, and this council certainly does. You've just heard from the Auditor General that the finances pass muster, so that's really good. But council's financial positions are always difficult. Councils are a very asset-heavy organisation, as you've heard, more than most. So you are a long-term asset manager. And because of that, the finances can flip very quickly with those ratios because the numbers are so large. They're big things, right? You keep adding, just for example, the wonders of accounting statements are that as you add more assets onto your base, which you do, that's partly what you do, the accounting standards require depreciation to be taken off of those. That runs through your financial statements. So that's building more pressure on them all the time as the asset base gets bigger. So they're difficult businesses to manage along those things. And because you're asset heavy, you're also exposed to the economic conditions, which are difficult. So at the moment, capital costs on everything are way higher than they were 2 or 3 years ago. In some cases, 30, 40% higher to get materials, apart from delays with supply chains and other things that make the whole area of assets increasingly difficult. So conditions can change quickly financially for councils. It is the nature of that business. So with that in mind, I think strategically the greatest challenge for council here is going to be aligning strategic priorities with budget rigour and ongoing disciplined financial management. There's a lot to be done, there's a lot you want to do, and it's a big organisation to manage with the assets it's got, and the assets are a big issue. So strategically there's a big issue to sort of line those things up. Budget rigour will be critical, it has been and it will continue to be, and disciplined financial management. And I say that with, you know, if we all think of our own budgets, disciplined financial management, we say no up to the point that we say yes. Yeah, the kids want something and we give in. That's the way it works at my house anyway. But it's tricky, right, because there's so many things that need to be done, and the question is, where do we say yes, and how do we manage the finances? So I think strategically that's a big challenge, and then operationally, asset management, I think, is the number one operational challenge because there's so many of them, and you talked about some of the other statements to bring assets up to condition. The closer you look at those, you realise that it's okay, but that there's just a lot there, and that just needs to keep being fed. And so that requires ongoing money, and you have restrictions on where your money comes from, that it's not endless. So I think balancing all of that is financially quite challenging. So asset management, I think, is an operational challenging risk. And just because it is for everybody, cyber risk is an issue. We've been working with the management quite closely here for over a couple of years now on cyber. And I think you're doing fantastic work, really good. But you just can never get comfortable with it. It's always there. We don't have the resources to combat it at the level everyone would like. No one does, really. But still, there's a lot to be done. And again, it all comes at a price tag. The one that's then on the horizon, just kind of off the port bow a little at the moment, is assessing the impact of climate risk. You're impacted here quite clearly by the ongoing natural disasters. As I say, the fact that you've topped the list, congratulations, just show, and no one would think Wingecarribee would, right? You would think some others would, but they just keep coming and they keep impacting on your assets, which is why that's a problem. So assessing climate risk is actually a really big issue. It's not some notional idea, it's really practical for organisations like yours. So assessing climate risk is a really big deal. And of course, we are in the era where then reporting on climate risk is happening. All the arguments about how we measure that and where that goes and what the source of truth are still happening. So we don't quite know what that looks like, but we do know that it's coming quickly. State government has just resolved its own approach to that, which will move on to local government reasonably quickly. So then we'll be reporting on it as well. And the reporting on it just will then bring to note where the challenges are very clearly with numbers beside them. So that's all coming along not too far away on top of the challenges that we already have. I'd just like to acknowledge that we on the committee appreciate the large amount of work involved with preparing materials for our meetings, which, as you'll see from our report, there's a lot of stuff to work through. Then they have to action matters from those meetings, follow through on the continuous flow of improvement opportunities that emanate from the audits, the reviews, the evaluations that we oversight. So we applaud and are very, very grateful for the tireless work of the committee's secretariat function, delivered through the Council's governance unit. Thank you. We keep you very, very busy. We thank you for the work. And on behalf of the committee, I'd like to acknowledge the professionalism and support of the GM, the senior management team, and all other council officers who contribute to the very wide-ranging work of this committee. Finally, I need to thank my fellow committee members and representatives of the Audit Office of New South Wales who help us a lot in this work for their participation, diligence, professionalism and contributions throughout the year. Mr Mayor, that concludes my remarks and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the councillors? Councillor Moylan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and through you, thank you, Mr Horn, for that advice. I would like to echo it that just like a household budget, these great financial results aren't by coincidence, and it's due to daily, weekly, monthly financial discipline. And we can only, as a council, achieve our strategic direction with that approach.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to ask any questions? Great, thank you, gentlemen. You're all done. Councillors, the recommendation is on page 14 of the agenda. Could I get a mover, please? Councillor Moylan and a seconder. Councillor Champion. Councillor Moylan, would you like to speak to this?
Nothing further, thank you.
Would anyone else like to speak for this? Anyone against? I'll put it to the vote. That is carried unanimous. Thank you. Item 8.4, Development Assessment Progress. The recommendation is on page 15 of the agenda, and I will move that. Could I get a seconder, please? Councillor Moyland. I think this is terrific. So thank you to the Director for putting this together. And for me, there's a couple of things I would like to highlight. The jump in performance to 26% is great. The determination rate for October was 142, and it explains that we are processing more than we are taking in, and we're getting on top of our backlogs. And I especially love the rate of internal allocation. So I think already we're off to a great start. So yeah, I think would anyone else like to speak for this motion?
Yes, Mr Mayor, if I may. A question through you, Mr Mayor, to the General Manager. I agree, this is a great start. We're definitely heading in the right direction. This is a very important issue for the community. My question is, so we don't fall into the trap of approving or declining DAs quicker, and measuring that, is there an opportunity, or is Council open to including qualitative measures in this report?
General Manager.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll defer to the Director, Communities and Place. Thank you, Mr McCabe.
Through you, General Manager. Certainly, we certainly can build on this foundation. The dashboard of a progress report that you look at, I focused to be on a one-page sort of information that could be easily digestible, but certainly we can build on the qualitative measures. So staff, with engagement with councillors, we can develop those to share with the community on a routine basis. What I will say is, when we talk about qualitative, we've got qualitative actions and we've also got qualitative measures. I'm happy to develop those and report on both. So what I mean by an action It might be our community forums. Page 79 of the operational plan states that we have to have 2 community forums per annum. They're scheduled to occur in 2025, and we actually had 2 in March this year. And so we can report on activities like that. We can report, we have what would be a government forum next week on contributions plans. So we can report on those actions from a qualitative point of view, and we can also look at some data measures on qualitative, such as the quality of applications, the quality of our work, etc. But I'd have to develop those, but no problem at all, and I can suggest some at the December meeting.
Great.
That sounds very promising. And secondly, would council be open to a workshop with key stakeholders from the community to be involved, to share best practices with neighbouring councils on how to really improve the DA process from a holistic perspective, complementing the community forums?
So I think this is we're sort of getting out of the scope of this item, but I'm sure if you want to look at it towards a NOM or something in the next meeting, do you have anything to add to that? Or do you want to answer?
Yeah. Always happy to answer. So the planners, as across all of our professional disciplines, we're members of networks, we're members of community practice, so that happens as a matter of course. And I know, and a couple of the councillors here were at the LG New South Wales conference, and we heard from the DepSec of planning, and they're keen to really support councils as well in improving DA processing times. So I'm not sure if the director has anything else to add to that, but we do participate in committees of practice. We participate in Department of Planning forums to look at how we can improve and work together, particularly around the portal and other initiatives.
Are you happy?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Great. I will... sorry, is there anyone else who wants to speak for this motion? Anyone against? I'll put to the vote, and it is carried unanimous. Item 8.15, Water Determination Policy Draft for Public Exhibition. The recommendation is on page 17. Could I get a mover for this? Councillor Duffy and a seconder. Councillor Foley. Councillor Duffy, would you like to speak to this? Would anyone else like to speak for this? Anyone against? I will now put it to the vote. That's carried unanimously. Okay. Item 8.6, Outdoor Dining and Goods on Footpath Policy Draft for Public Exhibition. The recommendation is on page 20 of the agenda. Could I get a mover for this? Councillor Russell and a seconder. Councillor Foley. Councillor Russell, would you like to speak to this?
This provides an amazing opportunity for our business community to contribute to our vision for the Highlands and what infrastructure ideas that they have to really improve the vitality and the vibrancy of our business districts. And I hope that we're able to all get out and talk to our community to make sure that everybody knows this is happening, because the more contribution to this, the better.
Thank you. Councillor Russell, would anyone else like to speak for this? Councillor Moylan.
Actually, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to suggest an amendment to this recommendation.
Sure. Could I get the wording of that amendment, please?
Certainly. To progress with this policy with an addition of a change to 7 years time limit, a monthly fee as opposed to a lump sum fee for business owners, for the application, and for the policy to be for the policy review to be scheduled for in 6 months' time to consider the City of Sydney style policy.
Could you just check that wording and see if you're happy?
And a monthly application fee as opposed to a lump sum fee. Thank you.
Happy with that wording?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, councillor, so we have an amendment and we'll need a seconder for that. Councillor Farrell. Councillor Moylan, would you like to speak to this?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I agree with Councillor Russell. I think this is a great initiative. This will put on the radar for business owners in the Shire how they're encouraged to expand their business offering and be more vibrant in terms of dining options, and therefore bring more customers into their cafes and restaurants. I feel we do have, it is quite light on, this policy, reflecting what we're currently doing. I think this is a great opportunity to look at the City of Sydney Council policy and bring in some of the features that has, including a style guide as to outdoor furniture, some pictorial examples on how to arrange furniture without limiting their creativity. And also I think the immediate change of a 7-year approval time will be more helpful to business owners so they don't have to go through red tape more frequently. I think the monthly fee will assist business owners with cash flow rather than a lump sum fee, and therefore dissuading business owners. And I also think, as I said, we can learn from the City of Sydney policy and guidelines.
Thank you, councillor. Would anyone like to speak for this amendment? Would anybody like to speak against this amendment? I will put this amendment to the vote. All, if you could raise your hands. We have, so we have Councillor Champion, if you just leave your hands up, please. Councillor Champion, Councillor Duffy, Councillor Farrell, Councillor Foley, Councillor Moylan, Councillor Russell, Councillor Smith. I declare that carried. This now becomes the motion. And would anybody else like to speak for this motion? Would anyone like to speak against this motion? I will now put this motion to the vote. Can I get a show of hands? We have Councillor Champion, Councillor Duffy, Councillor Farrell, Councillor Foley, Councillor Moylan, Councillor Russell and Councillor Smith. I declare that carried. 8.8 Code of Meeting Practice Draft for Public Exhibition. Could I get a mover for this? Councillor Foley. Sorry, Councillor Foley. Could I get a seconder for this? Councillor Farrell. Councillor Foley, you have the floor.
Yeah, I'd like to propose a change to the item. Is that
sure thing?
something I can
Could
do
I
this
get
way?
the wording of that change, please?
Let me just pull it up. So where we have clause 3.1 and 4.1, I'd like that to revert back to what the current times and days are for the forum and the meeting time.
Okay.
So I'm not sure about the wording for that, how that might work.
Could you sort that wording for us, please?
Yeah. Just bear with us for 1 second and we'll bring something up.
Okay.
Councillor Foley, could you just check the wording of that and make sure you're happy?
Yes.
Great. I'll get a seconder for this, please. Councillor Kent, Councillor Foley.
Okay. Thank you for making those changes. I think that the proposal includes some good, some positive changes, including having 2 speakers for and against each item. But however, I've proposed to keep the meeting time on the same day as the community forum to allow for continuity for community members who wish to speak on items that are presented in the agenda. Having the council meeting following directly afterwards means that members of the community are able to see their items that they've spoken to dealt with directly after they've presented them to the council, rather than having to come back on a second day.
Thank you, Councillor Foley. Would anyone else like to speak for this? Councillor Champion.
I'd just like to agree with what Councillor Foley mentioned then, and speak particularly to the retaining the public forum on the same day as the council meeting. I believe that moving it to a different day puts an additional burden on the public and creates a new barrier to engagement with the council, which in my mind is not ideal for creating participatory democracy. I think councillors have a responsibility to hear from the public, and the public have a right to hear from us, and I believe the best way to do that is to talk about the same issues in the same sitting.
Thank you, Councillor Champion. Would anyone else like to speak for this? Councillor Kent.
Yes, thanks very much. I agree with the previous speakers. I think I second the point about having the public meeting on the same day as the council meeting. I think it works pretty well at the moment, and it's more pure democracy for me to have people speaking before the decision-making meeting and to be able to hear those things live and current. And in terms of the proposed change of the meeting time, I think for some of the councillors, including myself, 1:30 is kind of in the middle of the business day in our day jobs kind of a thing. So for me, the rationale listed in the document is to adopt a commencement time that better suits the newly elected council. I'm just saying, as someone who works full-time in my day job, 1:30 is not an improvement for me. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak for this? Would anyone else like to speak against this? Councillor Russell.
This is not a decision that we're making today. It is simply putting this matter out for community input. The reasoning in the officer's recommendation for making these changes is to make the community forum the public forum more accessible to members of the community who might be working full-time and find 3 o'clock too hard to get to. So I would actually like to put out a change suggested, and then we can hear feedback from the community as to whether they are interested in having that.
So would you like to make a further amendment?
No, I'm just speaking against making an amendment because as it stands, if we put this amendment forward, then we're essentially saying no change, and there's no point putting an idea of a changing time out to the community.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. Would anyone else like to speak against this? Okay, I will put it to the vote. If I get a show of hands, please. We have Councillor Champion, Councillor Duffy, Councillor Farrell, Councillor Foley, Councillor Kent, Councillor Moylan and Councillor Smith. I declare that carried. Bear with me, this one's a little bit involved. So the recommendation is on page 37 of the agenda. That council note the Mayor is council's delegate of the following committees: Wallandilly Wingecarribee Bushfire Management Committee, Canberra Region Joint Association, Country Mayors Association. To note that the Mayor and Deputy Mayor are members of the General Manager's Performance Review Panel. Appoint Councillor Moylan, member of the General Manager Performance Review Panel until September 2026. Appoint councillors Duffy and Kent as members of the Floodplain Management Advisory Committee until September 2026. Appoint the Mayor or Council Delegate to the Illawarra Academy of Sport until September 2026. Appoint Councillor Champion to New South Wales Public Libraries Association, South East Zone until September 2026. Appoint Councillor Smith to the Southern Tablelands Arts Regional Advisory Panel until September 2026. Could I get a move? Are you happy with that wording?
Catching up.
Yeah, right, sorry. Good. Yeah, I'm happy with that wording. Sorry. I'll just double check that wording. So I believe I'm happy with that wording, and you'll have a chance to correct me if I've done it wrong. So I'll move that. Could I get a seconder, please? Councillor Foley. I don't have anything further to add other than jump in if I've made a mistake there. Would anyone like to speak for this? Anyone against? I'll put it to the vote. Show of hands, and that is unanimous. Carried. Thank you. Item 8.14, Centennial Park Concept Master Plan Adoption. The recommendation is on page 42 of the agenda. Could I get a mover for that, please? Councillor Smith. Could I get a seconder? Councillor Duffy. Councillor Smith, would you like to add anything? Would anyone else like to speak for this? Councillor Moylan.
Mr Mayor, thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor, question for the General Manager. I just want to understand if we originally had two pump tracks between Centennial Park and David Woods Park and we're now moving to one, or was there always just going to be one for the community? Thank you.
I'll ask the Director Service and Project Delivery just to talk a bit about the Centennial Park Planner Management. Thank you, Mr McAllister.
Thank you, General Manager. Through you, Mr Mayor. The David Woods playing fields play space upgrade does include the construction of a pump track, so that's one for Barrel. The pump track that was initially proposed for the Centennial Park adjacent to the creek has been removed as part of the master plan. On further review, the creek and the flood behaviour and the active erosion that is going on there at the moment have found that it's not a suitable site. There is an opportunity for an additional pump track to instead to be provided and as part of the Lowsby Park master plan. So this would then have it co-located with other youth facilities like the skate park. So the intent would be two within Barrel.
Good, gentlemen. Sweet. Thank you. Anything further, Councillor Moylan?
No further. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak for this? Anyone against this? Great, I'll put it to the vote. That is carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 8.16, Community Circles Funding Agreement. Could I get a mover for this? Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. I forget that every time. We safe? Okay. Item 8.16, Community Circles Funding Agreement. Could I please get a mover for this? Councillor Champion. Could I get a seconder, please? Councillor Farrell. Councillor Champion.
Thank you. Yes, I want to speak in favour of this motion and the huge community benefit that has been provided by community circles in connecting people to one another and weaving the fabric of our community. It's a fairly recent program in our Shire, but the many glowing comments that have come back through the public exhibition period, plus a lot more that I've personally heard anecdotally from people in the community, speak to the importance of these services to people and the testament to how it's become a really embedded part of our human infrastructure in the Shire. And the systems that help us thrive. I've met a lot of people who talk about their isolation in the Shire, but community circles has found a way to reverse that trend. I think work like this is actually a force multiplier for good by providing the modest amount of funding that we are talking about here, that's needed to ensure that the program can continue. We're tipping the scale in favour of mental health, physical health, emotional well-being, and those benefits in turn increase participation in work, socialising, sport, volunteering, and other kinds of contribution in the community. So it decreases crime, conflict, social dysfunction, and balloons out to have a huge return on every dollar spent. So this is exactly the kind of project that council should be funding.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak for this? Councillor Smith.
Thank you. I'd like to reiterate what Councillor Champion said, and in my previous role with the Southern Highlands Community Foundation, I was very well aware of what Community Circles and Touch by Olivia project had done. We were also, to your point, very aware that almost half of the people in our Shire did not feel connected. So this is a very tangible example of bringing people together in a range of ways. It's very creative in the way it works, and I think it's had real impact. So I think for the small amount of budget, it goes over and above in delivering. So I'd like to support it.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak for this? Anyone against? I will put this... sorry, I've missed you. Councillor Moylan, apologies.
It's all right. Mr Mayor, I'd like to move for an amendment.
Could I get the wording of that amendment, please?
That the community group resubmit an application with some financial information to justify the request.
Sorry, I'll just pass over to the General Manager to ask a clarifying question.
Sorry, Councillor Moylan, it's quite broad at the moment. In terms of financial information, just to help us help you, could you maybe be a bit more specific with that?
Certainly. A business case, perhaps some insight into the foundation's current financial status, so that we know that we're considering funding for a viable foundation. perhaps a financially viable foundation.
Sorry, Councillor Moylan, if I could maybe assist. In the attachments, page 516, there is a profit and loss statement there, which shows, if I can just pull that up, it is on page 516 of your business paper in the attachments. While you're looking for that, I can just, if Mr. Mayor, if you'd like, I can give a bit of background to. So, Touch by Olivia is a charitable foundation that was established in around 2007, and they started off with the mission of providing all abilities playgrounds, and they've worked to affect change in New South Wales as well as nationally. A couple of years ago, they moved from that. They felt that they had fulfilled their purpose. When they established the foundation, it was following the death of their daughter, and they wanted to make, deliver good out of something bad. A couple of years ago, they realised that there was a real need to connect people and a growing sense of isolation, so hence moved into community circles. We were the first council to take up the program. Canada Bay Council was closely behind us, but there is some detail on page 516 in your attachments, but certainly we can go back to them and seek further information.
With that information, would you still like to proceed with your amendment?
I'm not sure how to put this, perhaps in the against vote. I can express my concerns.
I'm happy to do a procedural motion of 5-minute break if you want to have a look at the financials. Would you like time to do that?
No, I'm pretty clear. Thank you.
So did you want to proceed with this amendment?
I'll do away with the amendment and then express my concerns in the vote.
Awesome. Okay. So what we'll do is we'll revert back to the original motion. No, I've lost myself. Oh, here I am. Yep. The original recommendation is again on page 47 of the agenda. It was moved by Heather, I believe. Sorry, Councillor Champion, I believe. And it was seconded by Councillor Farrell. Sorry, I'm just getting my bearings back. Heather's already spoken, so would anyone else like to speak for this? Would anyone like to speak against? Councillor Moylan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At the outset, I'd like to acknowledge the great work that this community group provides. There's no doubt about that. My concern is that 15,000, whilst a small amount in the scheme of things, I'm concerned that if the community group are saying that they won't be able to provide the service but for this 15,000, that perhaps the partnership isn't reflective of the financials. I think, notwithstanding the upcoming policy in reviewing how we give grants and fund various community groups, I think we can apply financial discipline in the present. And my question would be, if 15,000 is going to determine whether this community group continues or not, then we need to look a little closer.
Thank you, Councillor. Would anyone else like to speak against this? Councillor Champion, you have right of reply. Would you like to use that? Okay, with that, I will put it to the vote. Could I get a show of hands? We have Councillor Champion, Councillor Duffy, Councillor Farrell, Councillor Foley, Councillor Kent, Councillor Smith, Councillor Fitzpatrick, and I will declare that carried. And I'll ask Rachel to come, Councillor Russell to come back. All right. 8.19, project Civic Back Centre Back of House refurbishment. Could I get a mover for this? Councillor Smith. Could I get a seconder? Councillor Russell. Councillor Smith. You have the floor. Could you just turn your mic off, thanks?
Thank you. I have one question. Page 63 of the report, is that a possum?
I believe so.
Yes, it is. Yep.
Okay. So I would like to thank everyone for the report. Frankly, I was quite shocked by the conditions of the back of house, and I think it makes it quite clear why it's a challenge to get good staff to Wingecarribee Shire Council. So, yeah, I think if anyone would like to look through this report, it really is quite shocking, the conditions that staff have been made to work in, and frankly, I'm quite embarrassed that front of house is so lovely and back of house is not, and so it's a very important project, I think, and I'd really like to recommend this moving forward.
Thank you. Would anyone like to speak for this? Councillor Russell, thank you.
Thank you to the staff who prepared this report, and I'm sure that you have welcomed the opportunity to advocate for yourself in this matter. And it is particularly important, I think, to get this perspective that Councillor Smith referred to about our ability to attract and retain efficient staff. When I went searching as to the reasons why we were prioritising this particular project over the infrastructure that our community deals with, I did learn how important this was to ensure that we are a viable employer for incoming staff. And also in the long run, I can also see that by retaining staff to work for council, we will be saving money on contractors working for council because they don't want to work in our council buildings, and then that will be a cost saving for council that we can spend on our roads. So thank you very much for preparing this.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. Would anyone else like to speak for this? Councillor Foley.
Just in addition, I'd like to note that with the upgrades to the back of house, there's going to be significant energy savings with the energy efficiency measures that are put in place with new windows and new window frames, and I think that's a really great point to take on board as well.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak for this? Anybody against? I will put it to the vote. Could I have a show of hands? And that is carried unanimous. Thank you. Where are we up to? 8.21, Mossvale Trunk Main duplication, tender evaluation report. Could I please get a mover? Councillor Kent, could I get a seconder? Councillor Foley, Councillor Kent, you have the floor.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the General Manager, just looking at the background information to this, it seems that we're planning to do a detailed design before we've, around a preferred route, before we've reached arrangements with some of the landowners that will be on that route, so some private landowners and some Department of Transport land. So my question really is, given that we're doing the detailed design now for a lump sum, is it usual practice to undertake such a detailed design without the arrangements in place with all the landowners that would be on the route? And secondly, what are the pros and cons of this approach?
General Manager.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's right, we're just finding our rhythm. Thank you, Councillor Kent. I'll ask the Director Service and Project Delivery to speak to this. But it's what I would say in summary is it's not always a linear process. Sometimes it is a concurrent process. Thank you, Mr. McAllister.
Thank you, General Manager. Through you, Mr. Mayor. What we're looking at doing is to take or develop a detailed design and take what is a very, I guess, basic concept through to that detailed design. As part of doing that detailed design, we need to factor into a whole range of, I guess, impacts and consideration, and things like geotechnical conditions that need to be factored into the design, environmental constraints, creek crossings, existing utilities and infrastructure like roads you've mentioned, and even then the impacts to the private property owners. Until we have that detailed design and detailed studies, that final route won't actually be able to be developed. It's not although it's a fixed price, it is a iterative process, and it will be developed in phases, being able to take into account, I guess, the impacts of that detailed design and any environmental constraints or consideration. It also has the advantage of, I guess, enhancing our consultation with the community, and particularly those that are affected, based upon a more structured and robust design rather than the initial concept designs that we have.
Thank you very much for that. I'm learning as well, so thank you for the explanation. I think in summary, you'd say it's a pretty normal process to not have all the moving parts in place at this stage.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, this is a normal practice to, I guess, get an accurate view of how it can be built and what would be the costs associated with building it. Without doing it through this kind of a stage process, you start to build into errors, like a range of errors and potentially inaccuracies in the estimate to actually build the infrastructure.
Thanks very much.
Would anybody else like to speak for this? Anybody against? I will put it to the vote. Show of hands, please. Carried unanimously. Item 8.22, Welby Community Centre, lease to Highlands Theatre Group.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor. Item 8.20, pavement stabilisation. Are we coming back to that?
I think that was removed by exception, is that correct? Sorry, that's already been dealt with, so we will move to 8.21, Mossvale Trunk Main sorry, no, ignore me. 8.22, and I believe Councillor Champion had to leave. I remember this time. The recommendation is on page 84. Could I get a mover for this?
Sorry, can I just check? Steve Cheers donated to my campaign. Does that give me a that's an interest, isn't it?
We can sort that out after if you want to leave the room.
Yes, I'll leave the room.
That's okay. Could I please get a mover for that? It's not. Councillor Smith, can I get a seconder? Councillor Foley, Councillor Smith, would you like to speak to this? No, would anyone else? Councillor Foley.
Just a question, Mr. Mayor. With the 5-year lease, typically what happens at the end of a 5-year lease? Does the group that's in place stay there, or is the property made available for other interested community groups who might want to take up a lease in that space?
General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll ask the Director Corporate Strategy and Resourcing to talk about the leasing process as a general concept. Thank you.
Through you, Mr Mayor, thank you for the question. In relation to this specific lease, I'll have to take that on notice, but generally there's an option to renew and a first right of refusal, if that makes sense. Yeah, as I said, I'll have to take the specifics of this one on notice and come back to you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, would anyone else like to speak for? Would anyone else like to oh, sorry, I missed you there. Councillor Kent.
It's a great question about the lease. I'm kind of hoping that they actually don't need the 5 years, that as a new council, we've had the performing arts community in a state of flux, without homes, with buildings that are propped up, etc., etc. So I'm hoping the new council will sort this out and they won't need 5 years.
Thank you, Councillor Kent. Is there anyone else who wants to speak for this? Anybody against? I will put that to the vote. Can I get a show of hands? Councillor, I better read it out because people are out of the room. Councillor Duffy, Councillor Farrell, Councillor Foley, Councillor Kent, Councillor Moylan, Councillor Smith, Councillor Fitzpatrick. And we'll get everyone to return to the room, please. (8.24) Rates, Water and Sewerage Access Subsidy Program 24 to 25. The recommendation is on page 98 of the agenda. Could I get a mover for this? Councillor Smith, could I get a seconder? Councillor Foley, would anyone like to speak for this? Would anyone like to speak against this? Councillor Moylan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Again, back to the financial discipline that we've all heard about, and that's an ongoing thing, and it's notwithstanding the review on subsidies and community groups scheduled for next year's budget. My question is, or my suggestion is that we receive a report from Council on the financial status of each of these halls and associations so that we can make informed decisions moving forward between now and the next budget.
General Manager, is it appropriate to do this at the time of the next budget or bring, what's your suggestion here?
I think through you, Mr Mayor, I would suggest, as Councillor Moylan's flagged, we will be reviewing subsidies and grants in preparation for the 25-26 financial year. So I suggest that would be the best time to do that. And at that point, we will have a lot more information that will assist the council in making those decisions.
With that information, would you like to propose an amendment or would you want to wait it out till the next year?
We'll wait it out on the basis I understand these associations have an expectation of these subsidies, so thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak against this recommendation? I will put this to the vote. And that is carried unanimously. I believe we have no notice of motion, no question. General Manager, is there anything else you would like to discuss? Did you? With that, I will close the meeting at 5:24. Thank you.